in America is right now.
And we have seen Iran, write in its military doctrine. This is basically why they want the bomb. We've also seen them practice launching missiles.
My whole life I've been told that Iran is getting a bomb. Iran is getting a bomb. Iran is getting a bomb. Iran is getting a nuclear bomb. And yet here in 2025, they do not have a nuclear bomb. So why should we trust the American intelligence without verifying it?
They wanted a full-scale war. That's what Bibi wanted. That's what the Zionists around Trump wanted. And the one person who stood between America's involvement with a full-scale war in Iran was Charlie Kirk.
For decades, Americans have heard the same warning repeated again and again. Iran is close to building a nuclear bomb. Every few years, headlines appear claiming that Iran is only months away from becoming a nuclear power. Politicians repeat the same message, intelligence officials give ominous briefings for, and media outlets echo the threat. But here we are in 2025, and Iran still does not possess a nuclear weapon. That simple fact raises an important question. Why should the public blindly trust intelligence claims without independent verification? After all, the same institutions that now warn about Iran once made similar claims about Iraq. Those claims eventually led to one of the most controversial wars in modern American history. For some observers, this pattern looks familiar. They believe that powerful political and ideological groups have been trying for years to build public support for a military confrontation with Iran. According to this view, the push for conflict did not come from ordinary citizens. Instead, it came from a network of policymakers, strategists, and political influencers who believed that war with Iran was inevitably or even necessary. And yet, according to many analysts, one of the most prominent conservative voices who resisted that push was political commentator Charlie Kirk. Kirk spent years warning that another war in the Middle East would be a catastrophic mistake for the United States. While he often supported strong national defense policies, he consistently argued that launching a direct military conflict with Iran would lead to devastating consequences. His reasoning was rooted not only in current geopolitics but also in history. Kirk frequently pointed to one particular historical moment: the events of 1953. When American and British intelligence agencies helped orchestrate the overthrow of Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh. The operation ultimately led to the installation of the Shah. Its rule lasted until the Iranian Revolution of 1979. According to Kirk and others who share his perspective, that intervention had long-lasting consequences. The current Iranian government, they argue, cannot be fully understood without recognizing the role that foreign interference played in shaping the country's political trajectory. In other words, the instability that later emerged in Iran was partly a result of earlier actions by Western powers. Because of that history, Kirk believed the United States should be extremely cautious about trying to engineer regime change again. He often said that if the Iranian people wanted political change, it should come from within Iran, from foreign military intervention. This position placed him at odds with many figures in Washington who believed that stronger action against Iran was necessary. Over the years, American political discourse has repeatedly framed Iran as one of the greatest threats to global security. Some analysts warn about Iran's missile programs, its regional influence, and the possibility that it could eventually develop nuclear weapons. Others argue that these threats are exaggerated or selectively presented in order to justify military action. One of the key narratives used to highlight the danger is the fear of an EMP attack, an electromagnetic pulse generated by a nuclear explosion at high altitude. Such an attack could theoretically disable electrical infrastructure across a large region. Experts have debated this possibility for years. Some claim that even a single nuclear weapon detonated in space could cause widespread power outages, potentially leading to long-term societal disruption. Others say the threat is often overstated, and that such scenarios are unlikely. Regardless of the debate, the topic has been used frequently in discussions about national security. Years ago, a media program called Wake Up America featured interviews with national security analysts who warned about these dangers. One of those analysts was Dr. Peter Pry, a figure associated with government commissions studying electromagnetic pulse threats. During one interview, Pry argued that an EMP attack could devastate the United States if the country were unprepared. He claimed that prolonged power outages could lead to severe humanitarian consequences. The conversation eventually shifted to Iran. Pry suggested that Iranian military planning might include strategies related to missile launches capable of producing such an attack. According to him, Iranian exercises had simulated missile launches that could theoretically be used for that purpose. These kinds of discussions contributed to a larger narrative portraying Iran as an imminent existential threat. But critics argued that such narratives were often presented without sufficient evidence. Erika Kirk was among those who urged skepticism. He pointed out that Americans had heard warnings about an Iranian nuclear bomb for decades. Yet the prediction had never materialized. In his view, repeating the same claim year after year without results should make people question the reliability of those predictions. More importantly, Kirk warned that exaggerating threats could be used to prepare the public psychologically. For war, he believed that once a population becomes convinced that another country poses an immediate existential danger, political leaders can more easily justify military intervention. History provides several examples of this dynamic. Before the Iraq War in 2003, officials repeatedly warned that Saddam Hussein possessed weapons of mass destruction. Those weapons were never found. The result was a conflict that lasted years, cost trillions of dollars, and resulted in enormous human suffering. Kirk feared that the same pattern could repeat itself with Iran. In speeches and interviews, he emphasized, that war rarely ends the way policymakers predict. Military planners often assume quick victories, but conflicts can spiral into prolonged engagements that reshape entire regions. He also pointed to the human cost. Wars are not just statistics. They affect families, communities, and entire societies. Civilians often bear the greatest burden, while soldiers return home with physical injuries and psychological trauma. For Kirk, the lesson was clear. The United States had already spent decades involved in Middle Eastern conflicts in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and Syria. Each intervention had been justified as necessary for security or democracy. Yet, many Americans now question whether those wars actually achieved their stated goals. That skepticism formed the core of TS. And we all know of TS. And we all know I've been exploring that path. As we intervention had been justified, as where we would see some clarity. As we would see unless in this Kirk's argument, he believed that launching another war with Iran would likely produce the same outcomes. Massive financial costs, regional instability, and long-term consequences that policymakers could not control. And he warned that once a conflict begins, it rarely remains limited. Even a small military strike could escalate quickly. Iran has allies and regional networks capable of responding in multiple ways. An attack on Iranian territory might trigger retaliation against U.S. bases, allies, or shipping routes in the region. What begins as a targeted strike could rapidly expand into a wider regional war. That possibility was exactly what Kirk hoped to avoid.